Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul. Hopefully you're having an amazing day. I want to kick this video off discussing Intel and their discrete GPUs, as there is a very interesting tweet from Raja Koduri, which I'll read out first. Xe HPG mesh shading in action with the UL 3D Mark mesh shader feature test that is coming out soon. There's a lot to unpack with this tweet, but the timing of Raja's tweet is actually pretty impeccable, especially as we get into a leak actually for Intel's upcoming CPUs. We'll get to that in just a moment though. Obviously, the tech market has just been absolutely crazy over the past 6 to 12 months, with scalping being a major problem. In fact, here in the UK, they're actually considering making it illegal to bulk buy items, in other words, scalping, which, you know, it might help to fix some things, at least here in the UK, although it'll be interesting to see whether this actually prompts people, if availability is better here in the UK, if it prompts people to actually start trying to buy from the UK simply because they can't get one locally in their own country. Yeah, that would be an interesting scenario. But getting back to the GPU market, with all of the shortages, I do feel that things would be a lot better if Intel had a dedicated GPU out there, which is fairly decent. Even if they weren't competing at the bleeding edge, let's say a card which was as fast as the RX 6900 XT or the RTX 3090, let's even say that it was the equivalent of the RTX 3070, just for sake of argument. For people who wanted such a solution, you know, that kind of performance tier, it would definitely help to alleviate the stress in the market and would help to obviously just help general availability for everyone. So Intel's plans in terms of their graphics have been something that they've been kind of journeying with their discrete GPUs. So what we've already seen from Intel is several different laptop products from them showing off their GPUs, and obviously the iGPUs have come a long way in a relatively short space of time. However, I think what most PC gamers are looking for is their discrete GPUs. So going back to Raja's tweet, we can learn several things. The first is that 3D Mark's mesh shader feature test is coming, and that's actually really cool. Obviously, mesh shaders are a feature set of DirectX 12 Ultimate, and they are definitely going to really change the geometry pipeline. Obviously, DirectX 12 has its own, you know, kind of API and way of dealing with geometry, which is different from, say, the Vulkan implementation. But either way, it's going to be really cool to see mesh shaders become more common in PC gaming, and we should definitely see a pretty large performance bump as a result. The second thing we can take away from all of this, of course, is that Intel are getting closer and closer to actually showing off its silicon at large. In a previous tweet from Raja, we've already seen a Intel Xe GPU, and that one obviously was a two-tile design, and it seemed like it was designed around this server market, whereas this seems more along the lines of gaming, just obviously with HPG and the fact that he's showing it with mesh shading. So I think it's fair to say that the GPUs are coming on, and they are getting closer and closer and closer to release. Now, I am hearing that they will release this year, although it's going to be in the latter part of this year. Although, strangely enough, someone else told me that there will possibly be GPUs from Intel release next year as well. Although I'm unsure of the difference at this point between the ones releasing this year and next year, or if rather than this year, they're just going to release next year because of some type of delay. I'm trying to get some clarification on that point. Either way, I'm really excited to see what Intel actually brings to the table. They have the resources, without any question. They have the resources, they have the talent. Not only in terms of the actual design of the silicon, but the software, helping games developers and all of that stuff. They have the raw ability to do this. What concerns me is if they can actually execute. And I do feel that there's a pretty decent chance that they can, given all of the hardships that the team have put in so far. Personally, I'm really crossing my fingers that, you know, we do see an Intel GPU. And I did say that there's a lot of Intel stuff, and well, the next one is actually an Alder Lake engineering sample, which has been tested. And this one is quite interesting for numerous reasons. I'm actually pretty confident in saying what I'm about to say, and that is that I don't think that this leak is an accident. I believe it's an accidentally on purpose, especially given the timing of it along with Intel's GPU. I mean, I don't have any evidence of this, but I wouldn't be surprised if this was not an accidentally on purpose kind of leak. So full credit to Geekbench, where this result actually lies, and also full credit to Hot Hardware, which is how I discovered this. So let's just really quickly go over the score here. It's 6,536 with a multi-core score of 47870. We'll get more into how this compares to other processors in just a moment, as I feel that there are a couple of big things that we need to discuss. The first is that the base frequency, assuming it's being identified correctly, is 2.2 gigahertz. And the maximum frequency, well, Intel have a really impressive processor because it's 27.2 gigahertz. Yeah, I'm going to say that that's not quite right. And obviously it's being read incorrectly. There's several reasons that this could just be happening. The first is just that it's an early BIOS or something along those lines, or the fact that the actual architecture of the processor, or rather the design of the processor, is not something that perhaps Geekbench is used to dealing with. So possibly it's some kind of multiplication based upon the number of cores which are inside the CPU. And it might also be getting confused because obviously we have both Gracemont cores and Golden Cove cores on this processor. So it's possibly doing some type of multiplication or some other weirdness is going on. Either way, I'm going to probably say that the frequency is much more likely to be, very low 3 gigahertz to high 2 gigahertz based upon the boost frequency and, the other things that I just mentioned. So this is a 16-core, 24-thread processor. And the reason behind that is because that the Gracemont cores, which are the lower power CPUs embedded in this thing, there's 8 cores, but they lack hyperthreading. Whereas the Golden Cove processors, those do have hyperthreading. So, 8 times 2 is 16, plus the additional 8 cores, that gives you 24 threads. Now, the score is actually fairly impressive. So I just mentioned that we're looking at 47870 for the multi-core score. To put the 47870 multi-core score into some level of comparison, well, it's roughly on par with an Intel 10900K, depending on the configuration of the CPU. So you're going to be getting, 45,000 points, 46,000 points on the 10900K, again, depending on the configuration, what you've got your boost settings set to on the motherboard and memory configuration and all that type of stuff. But it is going to be considerably slower than a 5950X from AMD, which is obviously based upon the Zen 3 architecture. And in that instance, you're looking at much higher scores. You're looking, 66,000, 67,000 or so points. But it does have way more cores and threads. And obviously has the benefit of having much higher clock frequencies as well, given we're judging this with engineering samples. As for single core score, well, the result for the engineering sample is 6536, which is about what you would expect a 10900K to hit. A 10900K would have 100, 200 points advantage, but when you factor in that the Alder Lake processor is only running about half the clock frequency as the 10900K, actually less than half the clock frequency, I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of promise for Alder Lake, and possibly a reason that we're going to see Warhol released in the 4th quarter, as I mentioned in a recent video. And it's also going to mean that Intel's Rocket Lake is going to be in for a very interesting time. Rocket Lake releases pretty soon, actually. It's just over a month. That's what I'm hearing. And it will be on the LGA 1200 platform, but this Alder Lake will be on the LGA 1700 platform and will also benefit for things such as DDR5 and PCIe 5. But let's switch gears and let's get to some gaming news, as there is some very interesting things afoot. The first is that there are new Silent Hill games on the horizon. In fact, 2 of them, and one of them actually is possibly an exclusive for the PlayStation 5. I actually mentioned about this previously in a couple of videos. Dusk Golem, who is pretty well known for leaks, he actually leaked a lot of Resident Evil 8 stuff, which has actually turned out to be true. He leaked the following. Apparently, the situation is like I've been saying since last year. There may be 2 Silent Hill games in development. One is a PlayStation 5 game. The other is a multi-platform game by 2 different development teams. Now, something I know 100% is in 2018, Konami was shopping around for 2 Silent Hill games. One was a soft reboot. One, an episodic game. I thought the other game got scrapped, but talking to others, some have heard that the second game is also still in development somewhere. One game has Sony backing in some capacity, and the other is still unknown, but they're being very secretive about it, even those with known Sony contacts. Many within the company don't know a lot about the game. That's if it's all true, and this part isn't 100% verified, so take it with a grain of salt. Ultimately, just see what happens. What is 100% true is that there is a Silent Hill game gearing up for announcement. I'm also getting a lot of questions regarding Silent Hill and whether this is the game that Mark Cerny is involved with, and to my knowledge, and again, I could be wrong here, Mark Cerny is not involved with Silent Hill. That wasn't Dusk Golem actually mentioning that, by the way, that was me. So the last thing I would like to tackle today is, are Sony going to gobble up Square Enix? Well, according to TechNor, yes. News is leaking, seen some YouTubers reporting on this today, and yes, they're correct. The definitive edition, assuming that's what it's going to be called for launch, will be PS5 and PC only. This, by the way, is in regards to Final Fantasy VII Remake. Why? Because Square Enix are preparing to become part of PlayStation Studios over the next 24 months. So according to a lot of rumours, we've been seeing the PlayStation 5 will of course be seeing Final Fantasy VII Remake coming to it, which honestly, if you just kind of think about it logically, it's not too difficult to imagine that this is the case, and it will naturally have upgraded graphics, higher frame rate, SSD usage, that kind of thing. Again, I don't think this is exactly far-fetched. There's been a ton of rumours about this. I've, reported about it numerous times myself, and there also have been a ton of reports that it's coming to PC. I think even Square hinted that it's coming to PC, but I might be wrong on that. That's purely from memory. But the big question is, would Square become part of PlayStation Studios? Well, we've already seen reports that Microsoft are planning to gobble up another company, with Sega seeming to be the front runner in who would be purchased. There is a lot of questions there. I mean, would Sega want to be bought out by Microsoft? How would it work logistically? I don't know. But I have reported numerous times that Microsoft were looking to buy another company, as well as Sony were looking to purchase another company as well. Would it be Square? Well, geez, I mean, if it was true, and Sony did buy Square, let's just, pretend for a moment that it's 100% true, and Microsoft bought, say, Sega, that would be a really weird world to live in terms of video games. I mean, yeah, it would definitely punish those who can't play on all platforms. I think that's the best way to describe it. But can they afford Square? Well, I have to admit, I'm not exactly familiar with Japanese business law, so what I'm about to say I would take with a huge grain of salt, because, yeah, I don't really know how it works in terms of their laws and, what requirements companies have to be able to purchase another one in terms of, anti-competitive behavior and that type of thing. But in terms of cash flow, so I'm just using Wikipedia here, the revenue of Sony, admittedly, this is the entire Sony corporation, was about 8.25 trillion yen, or around 76 billion US dollars. Compare this to Square, and they still made a decent chunk of change. Their revenue in 2020 was around 260 billion yen. So again, not exactly a small amount of money, but nowhere near as much as Sony. And Sony obviously have been kind of raking it in terms of hardware, because of the PlayStation 5. Obviously, while the consoles are seemingly sold at a loss, people are still buying new controllers, PSN, all of the games, yada yada yada. So Sony are definitely not hurting for cash. I would be super interested to see if Sony did this. I don't know if I would like it necessarily for Sony to buy Square, just again, because while it doesn't affect me, because I own a PS5, I own an Xbox, but primarily, as regular viewers know, I'm a PC gamer, so it doesn't really affect me, but I don't really know how I feel about this, because exclusives are so required, but imagine in 3, 4, 5 years' time when Sony own, just assume this is true, they own Square, and then Microsoft owns Sega, and then another company and another company. It would definitely be a situation where you're definitely going to be hurting if you don't own a specific platform. And I do understand, though, that exclusives are so required to be relevant nowadays. So, but yeah, let me know your thoughts on this one down below. With that said, I'm going to run off. Thank you very much for watching the video. Apologies for sounding a little bit out of it for this video. I'm still recovering from my plague, unfortunately, so hopefully I'm not quite as half dead tomorrow. With that said, thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.